UNLV Microcertificate Economics. Okay, so we want to talk about the way that modern economists since, the 90s, 2000s, the last, 30 years have thought about macro, which is strange because it's really not the way necessarily we teach this in textbooks. But anyway, remember that we had this neoclassical synthesis that starts in the 50s, and it's the idea that we may love Keynes, but we want to do math. And, the theory is supposed to drive how we do our analysis, not the other way around, but that's not how this worked. And the way we wanted to do analysis drove the theory for many years. So it's really easy to do math on classical economics. It's impossible to do math if you actually believe in Keynes and what Keynes said. So if you want to do math, you have to assume the classical economics is correct, but you can leave the door open for there being short-run issues that we can put into our models. One of the first things that begins to change in the 60s and really takes off, and people have won the Nobel Prize for in many respects, is this concept of rational expectations. What makes Keynes not mathematical is that he believes that we can't really tell about expectations and how they're formulated and what they do, right? Financial markets are casinos. People have animal spirits. This is not math. All right, so rational expectations basically says that people understand the way the economy works, and expectations of people are going to be in line with the theory. Okay? And, it's one of those deals. There's not a lot of evidence that people actually do this stuff. It's just like string theory in physics. Everybody believes it, but no one's been able to prove it. So here's we are. But everybody, all sides of this kind of believe in rational expectations. So two schools are going to start up here. One, some people call the new classical school, other called real business cycle theorists. Either way, we'll get to that in a second. And then there's the new Keynesians. We're very creative in our names, right? The new classicals and the new Keynesians. So anyway, if you're a new classical, what do you have to do different than the old classicals? Well, the answer is the old classicals said recessions can't happen, when we know they do, right? So the new classicals, their theory of recessions, which is this real business cycle theory, is that recessions happen because of something called supply shocks. And again, is that this real business cycle. I didn't write it back up there again, but a real business cycle. So something disrupts supply. And if you look at our economy now, we're having these credible supply shocks, but they're turning into inflation, not recessions. Okay? But natural disasters, economic disruptions, this whole pandemic and its disruption, we had a very quick recession, right? And now we still have these economic disruptions, but now they're feeding inflation, not a recession. So that would be the new, right, a new classical. See? Supply shocks. Related to this is something called creative destruction, and that's a reminder to us that when we invent a new technology, like we invent computers, it's not all good. If you think about how many people lost their jobs when we really got the computer revolution in the 80s and the 90s, all these clerks, all these people who did work, right? We used to have typists in my college, my business school, to help people type things. Well, now everybody has a PC, and we don't have typists anymore, okay? So creative destruction, the creativity of capitalism also results in the destruction of jobs, not just the creation of jobs. It also involves the destruction of jobs. So they have a variety of reasons that there might be a recession, these real business cycles. Now, except for the pandemic, It's pretty hard in history to find any of these. And so, I would estimate that maybe 15% of economists, maybe 15 to 20% of economists fall in this new classical or real business cycle group. Okay? So, recessions are going to happen. They're unavoidable. They might even be good for us because they might be caused by new technology replacing old technology and cleaning stuff out. How does this explain the Great Depression? It can't possibly begin to explain the Great Depression. And so that's, again, why it's not the most popular theory on the block. But there's still people who are strong adherents to it. Okay? Now, the new Keynesians, they invent a new technical term, and that technical term is sticky. They say that recessions happen because wages and prices are sticky. Yeah, technical term, sticky. So what does that mean? Well, why might businesses not raise their prices? Why might prices be sticky? Or why might they not lower their prices, right? So one is menu costs. It costs money to change your prices. This is less and less true over time. But if you're McDonald's and you've got all kinds of materials that you printed up and you've got 10,000 stores across the country and you've sent them all out to a $1, $2, $3 thing with these things in it, well, you're not going to change your prices really quick because you're not going to take a Sharpie and start playing with the chart, right? So we call that menu costs, and less important over time. The other thing is consumers like to know what the price is. I like to know what my Starbucks price is, right? So instead of Starbucks, raising their prices a penny a week, they don't raise their prices for 2 years, and then they raise their prices, 50 cents all at once. And we get really mad for a few days until we adjust the new prices, and then we go on. Consumers, when they're buying, they like to know what the price is going to be ahead of time. And that results in sticky prices. Okay? So prices aren't going to fall, and this theory is all about, hey, prices aren't going to fall. And we've seen it. And part of it is that businesses aren't really in competition with each other. Excuse me. There's no competition, right? And so when the price of oil went up, the price of gas shot up. And now the price of gas, as I'm talking here, the price of oil went down, 20% in the last month, and gas prices have still gone up, right? Because the gas companies can make them go up. If there were a competition, we'd see gas prices change faster and quicker, but they don't. Okay? So, why are wages sticky? Well, there's some pretty obvious reasons. One is that if we lose our job, we have to search for a new one. Right? Classicals assume that you lose your job, you automatically, instantly, basically know what's out there. We engage in job search, and we have what's called a reservation wage. If I get fired from my professor job, I'm not grabbing my Starbucks barista apron tomorrow, right? I'm going to look for a technical job, a high-paying job, a job that uses my skills. Okay? So we look for jobs, and we don't start thinking about becoming a barista until we've exhausted our search for something which is what we're trained to do, right? So we search for jobs, and as we're searching for jobs, wages tend to go down slowly. Number 2, people have contracts. I have a contract. There's a limit to what the regents can do to my pay because I have a contract. LeBron James is owed all that money, and it doesn't matter whether the Lakers are profitable or not profitable or what's going on. They owe him the money. And then the third reason, which is the most important part of this, is what's called efficiency wage theory. Classicals assume that all workers are the same. We know they're not. In a recession, businesses have a tendency not to want to cut their wages because if they cut their wages, the workers are going to decide who leaves, and the best workers are likely to leave. What we want is to keep the good workers. So how do we keep them? Well, We keep the good workers by keeping their pay high, and we get rid of the workers that we don't want, and that's called efficiency wage theory. So businesses might not want to lower wages because it would be bad for their business based on who's going to leave their company and who's going to stay at the lower wages. So the new Keynesians believe that sticky wages and prices cause recessions, but the classical econ is right in the long run. Remember that Keynes said sticky wages and prices do not cause recessions. He specifically said that. So the fact that his name is stuck on this theory, he's probably over there in England spinning really fast wherever he's buried. Okay? We want to talk about two other theories that says recessions are caused by financial system issues. One by Hyman Minsky, who is Keynes's follower, and one by Friedrich von Hayek, who is Keynes's enemy. Janet Yellen, and I should have put her picture on here, I don't know why I didn't, who was chair of the Federal Reserve under Obama, she argued that the theory that best explains the crash that happened in 2007, 8, and 9 is Minsky's theory. She called it a Minsky meltdown and gave speeches about how that theory was the one that explained things, not the others. Again, the new Keynesians, I would say that 75% of economists are new Keynesians, which means you've got 5 to 10% of economists who are something else, right? So you got 5, 10% of economists who are something else. Maybe 5% of them are smart. The other 95% of economists aren't. But anyway. So, Minsky, stability leads to instability. The more stable things become and the longer things are stable, the more unstable they will be when the crisis hits. Okay? A Minsky meltdown. So what does Minsky say? In a boom, he says that savings grow faster than investment. And remember, we talked about in an earlier lecture here that Ben Bernanke, the chair of the Federal Reserve before Janet Yellen, said the financial crisis was caused by this huge influx of savings from outside the United States. So we get this huge amount of savings in. There's nowhere for it to go. There's no traditional mechanism whereby our economy could absorb that amount of savings. So what happens is all the rates of return and interest rates fall because of all of this money flowing in that we got to do something with. When the rate of return falls, investors are going to take risks. The only way they can make more money is to take more risks. But as they take more risk, as the leaders out there take more risk, the average person gets caught up in their animal spirits and go, hey, these guys say house prices never go down, invest in houses, blah, 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 buying 6 houses, buying 8 houses. Animal spirits take over. And we begin to believe that there's no risk. We're seeing these people who should know what to do, invest in these things. That leads us to believe that these things are not risky. Animal spirits take hold. We put way too much money in way too many risky things, and the economy goes, which is exactly what happened in the 2000s, right? Exactly. And again, many of us saw it coming. Nobody listened to the people who saw it coming. They listened to the people who said, oh, everybody can make money in the housing market. Same thing that happened in 1929, more or less. The other side of this is Friedrich von Hayek, and we have a rap video, which is alleged to be Keynes versus Hayek for you to watch. It's actually the new Keynesians versus Hayek. Keynes would not have thought that was an accurate portrayal of him, but it was done by people who are Hayekians, who are what we call Austrian economists. Hayek is also famous, more famous in the real world, for his attacks on socialism. Some very famous books written by him, which are pro-capitalism, pro-market, and anti-socialism. Milton Friedman was a big fan of Hayek. What Hayek says is that interest rates fall in a boom. Why? Well, young Hayek said it was a part of capitalism, that it was just natural part of capitalism, which means basically he was saying that capitalism has a flaw in it that the boom automatically creates the bust. And it doesn't take anything but the boom to create the bust. Old Hayek started blaming the Federal Reserve. So who knows? Young Hayek just said it's a part of capitalism. Old Hayek decided to blame the Fed. You can go either way. What he says is that these low interest rates cause malinvestment. And what we mean by that is you have investments either by a business or by an individual that really aren't profitable and really shouldn't be done. But if interest rates are too low, you'll do them. Okay? Somebody will do it. And what that means is we have a lot of money invested in production of things we don't need. So we get overproduction, right? So if you want to argue that this is what happened in 2007, 8, and 9, go right ahead, because we had really low interest rates. We had too many houses. Eventually, the market can't absorb all those houses, and the economy goes. Rand Paul's dad, who was a senator, Ron Paul used to have arguments with Ben Bernanke at the Fed when he would come testify to Congress, where Ron Paul would go, interest rates are too low. They've been too low for too long. You know what's going to happen? It's going to cause a bust. And Bernanke would say, no, we got this under control. Anyway, yeah. Couple other theories that we need to know. There's a theory called the Phillips curve. The Phillips curve just says there's a trade-off between inflation and unemployment. The higher inflation is, the lower unemployment is. The lower inflation is, the higher unemployment is. This theory was developed a long time ago. Without a theory behind it, it was just an observation by this guy Phillips right there, A.W. Phillips. Yeah, so let's watch a video.
I've been seeing lately that economists are increasingly worried that the idea of a Phillips curve that links unemployment and inflation is no longer describing what is happening in today's economy. Have you been considering on that? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, very much so. We spend a great deal of time on that. The connection between slack in the economy, or the level of unemployment, and inflation was very strong if you go back 50 years, and it's gotten weaker and weaker and weaker to the point where it's a faint heartbeat that you can hear now. It's still there. You can see it at the state-level data and things like that. But I think we really have learned, though, that the economy can sustain much lower unemployment than we thought without troubling levels of inflation. Mm-hmm. And I think I would look at today's level of unemployment as well within the range of potential estimates, of plausible estimates of what the natural rate of unemployment is.
So, real people kind of don't believe in this theory anymore, but it's in every textbook on the planet. It's an old Keynesian, a crude Keynesian theory that there's a trade-off between inflation and unemployment. It's tied to what we still call the natural rate of unemployment, what lots of people call the natural unemployment. Technical people call that the NAIRU, the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment, which means there's some level of unemployment that if it gets too low, it creates inflation. Again, the data don't necessarily support any of this. The NAIRU says that if unemployment gets too low, that by itself causes inflation. So the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment is the rate of unemployment that's high enough, the lowest rate of unemployment that's high enough that it's not causing inflation. We also call that the natural rate of unemployment, and maybe that all doesn't really exist anymore. So what does AOC believe in and her friend Bernie? Well, they believe in something called modern money theory. Modern money theory basically says in our fiat money world, the quantity of money doesn't matter and the quantity of debt doesn't matter as long as the people have faith. So if we have faith in our money and we have faith in our government, then the quantity of money and the quantity of debt won't matter, and we can print money and create debt, and the government can do all this fancy stuff without any consequences. Okay, so moving on.